Alright, it's time for an update and forecast on some of the wildfires going on in California. Throughout this video, we're mostly going to be focusing on the Smith River complex, which is up in Northern California. You can see some of the smoke showing up on the satellite imagery right there. Now with the Smith River complex, this is showing it's at around 67,000 acres. But it is made up of a number of different fires. So whenever you hear the term complex, that means it's multiple fires that you're looking at. And I think this was the best map that I could find that shows distinctly which fires are which. You've got the Corral Fire, the Diamond Fire, the Kelly Fire, that's clearly the largest. The Coon Fire, the Hurdy-Gurdy, Island, Prescott, maybe even the Doe down there. And I think before I go on, maybe the first thing that I should show is just where we have evacuation orders and warnings. So where you see orange, that's a level 3. That means go, leave immediately. Yellow is level 2. That means get ready to leave at a moment's notice. And then level 1 is be ready for the green color there. And that reminds me, it'd also be useful if you could see my pointer. So I'll bring this up. So anywhere where you see the orange, that's where we have the level 3. So go, leave immediately, and then where you see those yellows, that's where you should maybe start getting ready. So now let's actually look into the Smith River complex and look at some of the individual numbers that we have. So the Diamond Fire is at 548 acres. The Kelly Fire, which is the largest, is around 62,000 acres. Prescott Fire is 589. The Coon Fire is 1,200. Hurdy-Gurdy is around 1,800, Island Fire 300, and then Corral Fire about 1,000. And as you can see, all of those right now are listed as 0% containment. So when it comes to containment, you can actually look over here and go into Google Earth, because this is going to show us where some of the recent fire activity has been. Where you see the yellow, let's see if I turn that off. Yellow is older than previous 24 hours, and the red is going to be last 6 to 12 hours, and the very dark red is going to be in the last 6 hours. But we're not going to see as much in the last 6 hours, maybe even the last 12 hours, because in the overnight hours we've had some fog moving in, some humidity, some lower temperatures. So that's been helping reduce fire activity overnight. But then it's during the afternoon, that's when your temperatures increase, your relative humidity drops down, and that's where you see the most active fire behavior. So let's just take a closer look at this, and let's look at, what was this far left fire? So that far left fire is the Corral Fire, and I did watch one report that said they already had containment all the way around that fire at that point, and then in this little branch of the Kelly Fire right here, they were trying to do a firing operation, but I believe the weather conditions didn't really allow for it, but then they're going to retry the second they get the chance. I think a very similar thing happened up on this northeastern side of the fire. But just looking at this, you can see exactly where the fire has extended at this point. Looks like that is Gasquet down here. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Looks like we have some structures in the area, and this is the most recent heat information that we have to deal with right now. So it looks like it's still towards the northern edge of Gasquet at this point, and that is one of the areas where they're hoping to, when they say do a firing operation, that means they would try to clear out some of this fuel, actually burn it out, so that if this fire starts backing down this hill, then there wouldn't be any fuel for it to burn. And then hopefully the fire would stop in its tracks before it gets into any of those communities. And then let's see where we've also seen some red. Looks like we have some red down here. That's where you have some of the more recent fire behavior. And then we also saw it especially on this northern section of the fire. So up right on the California-Oregon border. And then over here, I believe is where I heard the report that they were trying to get in some dozer line, but then the fire started to spot. It looks like that's a spot fire up there. So then they had to kind of abandon what they were doing and go to exactly where the fire was burning at the moment. So that's the overall wide view of what's going on. Now let's actually kind of look in to see if our satellites are picking up any heat at the moment. But you notice on that satellite imagery, some of that is fog in the very early morning hours. You can tell because it kind of is that lighter color and then it burns off. But it does look like it's pretty smoky conditions up there at the moment. We'll take a very close look at the weather forecast. So looking at this fire, red is where you've had some more of the recent fire activity, especially northern edge, western edge, and then on the southern edge of the hurdy-gurdy. Looking at the satellites right now, so where you're seeing the orange box, that's where you have some current heat activity coming up. These boxes aren't always accurate for exactly, where the fire is. Doesn't mean everything down here is burned, but it's always a good indication of where we're picking up some heat on the fire at the moment. And right now, not seeing very much. And that's not really a huge surprise. During the overnight hours, early morning hours, that's when you have more moisture in the air. That's when you have more or cooler temperatures, so reduced fire activity. But then temperatures come up in the afternoon, humidities drop, the drier the air is, the drier your fine fuels are going to be, and the faster the fire is going to be able to spread. So let's just get into the weather forecast here. You can see a lot of the heat is down in Southern California. That's where you have the orange, that's a heat advisory. Purple's your excessive heat warning, but nothing up here for Northern California, and no longer any red flag because the thunderstorm threat has significantly diminished from what we were seeing in previous days on this fire. And that's actually how this fire started in the first place. It was lightning, and then we've had a number of days with thunderstorm activity over it, and that's led to some gusty outflow winds, and that leads to faster spread, but more erratic spread as well. It makes it pretty hard to forecast what the winds are going to do on this fire. But looking at the overall pattern, you can see why there's a lot of heat down in SoCal, but not so much in NorCal. If you look at this map right here, so there's a big, let's actually get my little drawing tool out here. There's a big high pressure over the middle of the country right now, and that is associated with very warm air. So that's why some of that warm air is extending into Southern California. But up in NorCal, you can see that let's maybe change this to blue so it's better for our cooler temperatures. We have a low off of the northwest right here. And what that does is it actually takes in some of this cool, moist air from the ocean, and it pushes it into Northern California, especially along the coast. And our fire actually is relatively close to the coast. You can see where some of that smoke is showing up. You can imagine some of that cooler air filling in because of that low that's spinning. So if I click through there, you're going to be able to see what this low is going to do. If you look very closely, you can see the little wind arrows there. That represents the direction the wind is going. So that low is going to move in. That's Tuesday at that point. So this could be good and bad news for the fire. So overall, I think it's good news because it's going to bring in some cooler temperatures. It's going to push in some moisture. But where we could keep a close eye on this one is the closer those lines are together, the faster your winds are going to be. It's called isobars, lines of constant pressure. So down over Southern California, it's going to be very calm winds because there's almost no crossover, or those lines are very far apart. Whereas as that low pushes through NorCal, those lines do get a little closer. So we may see winds pick up, and we can actually check that on the weather forecast here. But I think the most important aspect right now to look at is our temperatures down in, let's go to about 4 p.m. this afternoon. That's usually when you see your daytime highs. That's where we have some triple digits down in SoCal. But around where our fire is, mid-70s throughout the day today. So that's a lot better than some of the conditions we were dealing with in previous days. And then I know for the Central Coast, we have a warming trend through Wednesday, but let's see what's expected up in NorCal. So as that low gets closer, actually cooling down a little bit on Monday, high in the low to mid-70s. And then on Tuesday, that's when that low looked to be directly over NorCal, so that's going to bring in some of that cooler air with it. So at that point, temperatures actually drop down. Your daytime high maybe low 70s. And then Wednesday, that's the peak of the warming trend in for the central coast. Does look like our temperatures come up slightly, but not very much. So overall, that's pretty good news to see right there. Now let's take a look at humidity, because that's actually the most important factor when it comes to wildfire. And we can just zoom way in to actually see what's going on here. So you can see how that blue to greenish color extends, and it would extend a lot more in the early morning hours, so it'd be nice to be able to show that. This is what it looked like at about 7 a.m. You can see how the cooler, moisture air, I think that's a word, moves in over our fire area. But then as you get into the afternoon, things do dry out, and that's about 5 p.m. Let's go back to 3 p.m. Does look like there's going to be some pretty dry conditions out there. That kind of random click shows a relative humidity around 17%. So that's why our fire activity picks up during the afternoon hours. Now let's fast forward to Monday. Looks like maybe a little more moisture coming in as that low moves in, maybe bringing a little moisture with it. Should be similar story on Tuesday. Yeah, even more moisture coming in over our fire. So that's overall, I'd say, favorable in terms of fire activity, especially compared to previous days when we had that wild card of thunderstorm activity coming through, leading to very gusty winds, while at the same time we had very warm, dry air up there. Now it is still pretty warm and dry. It's just an improvement over previous days. And I was reading one report that they're really hoping to take advantage of this weather to hopefully get some more containment around this fire. Right now, the most recent map we have, the black line shows containment, red line shows no containment, just showing black on the very western side of the Coon fire and then the western side of the Corral fire. But again, I did hear one report where it sounded like they had containment all around the Corral fire there. So yeah, that's something we'll keep an eye on. But humidity wise, looks like our driest afternoons are going to be today and Wednesday. A little bit more moisture coming in on Monday and Tuesday. Now let's take a look at the wind gusts, because that's usually what leads to the most rapid spread on wildfires. Does look like there's still the chance for some gusts around 20 to 25 miles per hour this afternoon. We had some winds around 20 miles per hour yesterday that led to some activity in the afternoon hours. Very similar story for Monday. Tuesday as the low moves through. Let's see if that kicks up our winds a little. Yeah, it does look like that's going to be increasing our wind gusts. So that's right as those lines get a little bit closer together there. So we'll keep a close eye on that. It'll be cooler temperatures and more moisture in the air, but it'll be windier. So that's where there's a little bit of a question mark for what's going to happen on our fires. And you also notice winds look to be coming from the northwest. So that would try to push the fire towards the southeast. And then finally, I don't believe there's going to be any thunderstorm activity, but just to be sure, yeah, so that's one good thing about this forecast. And there's a few good things: cooler temperatures, more moisture, but also no more thunderstorm activity, and that's certainly going to help us out. Now, in the long range, it does look like we have some above average temperatures expected throughout California. But then, so that's 6 to 10 days out, and then 8 to 14 days out, it looks like we're back to more average temperatures out there. So with all that being said, we can take a look at the smoke forecast for the day. And yeah, I usually have to refresh this screen before it will actually play during a live stream. So let's just click in here. Notice some smoke already over the fires, but then it's as you get into the afternoon hours, that's where it's expecting more of that smoke to be produced, and that can have impacts on aerial operations, especially if your winds aren't as strong. Overall, you don't want strong winds for a fire that leads to rapid growth, but when you have calm winds, it can also kind of backfire against you, because it can allow the smoke to settle in over the fire, so then they're not able to use aerial operations to fight it, and that's actually pretty important on the Smith River complex because a lot of this terrain is so steep that it's very hard to get crews into these areas. So then kind of one of the best tools that you still have to fight these fires is aerial operations. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on how much aerial activity we see as we get into the afternoon, but this map usually shows planes, and not seeing any planes at the moment. Looks like there's maybe one over the Bluff complex, but not seeing anything over the Smith River. And that might just be because of some of the smoke activity that we have up there. Now, one thing that I wanted to go over in this video is the rainfall that we picked up from Tropical Storm Hilary, because that has a big impact on wildfire activity across California. So in Southern California, that's where we picked up the most rainfall, especially in the mountainous areas and around Los Angeles. Where you see the orange to red, that's where we had 5, 6, 10 inches of rainfall. So in the short run, it was pretty bad for Southern California. I've seen a lot of footage of flooding, landslides, debris flows. In the long range, though, that's actually going to help us out a lot this wildfire season because it brings a lot of moisture back into our fuels. Usually when we get into August, what I'll usually say is, oh, we're just going to see fire danger increase until we get our first good rain in maybe the end of October, start of November, maybe not even till December. And our fuels are just going to get drier and drier until that big rain comes in. But with Tropical Storm Hilary, we had a big rain in what I always think of as kind of the start of kind of the more extreme part of wildfire season. It's usually mid-August that I start paying attention more to the big fire potential out there. But with all this rain, that brought a lot of moisture back into our fuels and in some of the areas where we see the worst wildfire danger. So that's really going to help us out down in Southern California and even stretching up into the Tahoe area. You can see we picked up over an inch where we have that green stretching all the way around South Lake Tahoe there. So, it is still California. We do still have a Mediterranean climate, which means we're dry during the summer. And it does look like we have a lot of warm air on the way over the next 6 to 10 days and through this Wednesday. So that'll dry out our fuels. But that is some pretty good news in terms of wildfire danger, all that rainfall that we picked up from Hilary. Now, places that didn't pick up as much rainfall, looks like the Central Coast barely saw any, maybe a trace around Big Sur. Bay Area, barely any at all. And then up where we have the Smith River complex, that's where you have that purple color, 0.1 inches, and some of that might actually just be from the thunderstorm activity. We had very little impacts from Tropical Storm Hilary around this area, and that's a big part of the reason that we're seeing the activity that we have in the exact areas where we didn't pick up rainfall from Hilary. So moving forward this wildfire season, the main places I'm going to be watching: Central Coast, Bay Area, especially Napa, Sonoma County, and then anywhere that you see in the purple or even the blue on this map, 1/4 of an inch isn't all that much rainfall. So those would be the key areas I'll be looking at. But yeah, pretty good to see all the rainfall we picked up in SoCal. And it wasn't just Tropical Storm Hilary that has led to more moisture in our fuels this year. We also started the year off a lot better because of all the rainfall we picked up this winter and even some rainfall into May. This is what the drought looked like in California 1 year ago today. I actually have the exact numbers here. 1 year ago today, 98% of the state was in severe drought, the orange color. 43% was in extreme drought, and then 17% was in exceptional drought. And then let's do the big reveal here. How has that changed with all the rainfall we picked up this last winter, and then even with Hilary? Drought is basically gone in California. And what that means for wildfire is there's more moisture in the fuel, so it's harder for fires to start, and then when they do start, they're not going to spread as rapidly. Now, I will point out, though, abnormally dry conditions and moderate drought in the exact area where we are still seeing some wildfire activity. So that's not a coincidence. And then if we come and look at the actual numbers right now, this is where there is some good news. 0% of our state is in exceptional drought, extreme drought, or severe drought. Only 1.38% of the state is in that brown color, which represents moderate drought. Unfortunately, it is where we do have some wildfire activity going on at the moment, and abnormally dry conditions stretching throughout Northern California, where we do have the Smith River complex burning right now. So overall, there's a lot going on in California. I think the rest of this wildfire season is going to be very interesting to watch, to see how much all that rainfall that we picked up from Tropical Storm Hillary actually helps us. And then we'll also keep a close eye on the Smith River complex over the next few days, as we see some changes with winds potentially picking up on Tuesday, but cooler air and more moisture moving in as the low starts to move into Northern California. So hopefully you found this video helpful. I'll do more updates on the Smith River complex moving forward, and thanks for watching.